Reet. Somewhere. We are back where we started, Reet said, pointing to a particularly odd scuff mark. He'd noticed it the first time they'd passed it, drifting in the endless corkscrewing of the strangely cramped corridor. It was unmistakable, saying it again. And yet, he was sure they hadn't passed the place where they'd come in, where the passageway turned off to the space Mom and Nana and Mixaftua were in. Qven frowned at him, puzzled. No, we aren't. We are, he insisted. Look. He pushed himself back to navigate the warped hallways until he found himself faced with Qven again. See? No, said Qven. You are somewhere else. Where I am is different. Reet blinked, nonplussed. How can I be somewhere different? I don't know, insisted Qven, entirely serious. But you are. I don't like this. Come back around. When Reet didn't answer, he asked, Can't you feel it? No, said Reet. Honestly, this seems exactly the same. It's the same place. Qven blinked, and her eyes seemed to shine oddly. No, Reet realized. It was tears in her eyes, clinging because there was no gravity to pull them down. What is it? He asked. What's wrong? Nothing, Qven answered, and Qven was a pretty good liar, but Reet knew him well enough to know that wasn't true. Well, Qven didn't cry for no reason, not that Reet had seen so far. No one did really in Reet's experience. Qven? Please, come back around. And Qven never spoke so sharply that Reet knew of, so he pushed himself back until he found Qven again. Are we in the same place now? Qven had cleared the tears from her eyes somehow. Yes. That's really weird, he said. It is, Qven agreed. He opened his mouth to say, How come you can feel it and I can't? But he remembered Qven seeing and feeling and doing things that only adults could, that Reet could not. Qven, Reet realized, was part adult in a way that Reet was not, and that was very possibly connected to the attack he had told him about. At any rate, he supposed that Qven had asked himself the same question, why couldn't Reet sense what was plain and obvious to M, and come up with an answer that distressed M. All right, he said. Are there any doors here? No, said Qven, but I think there might be one up ahead. He bit her lip and furrowed her brow. There's something, anyway. Then let's go. When they reached the scuff again, he said, Is this a different place too? Yes, said Qven, but whatever it is I sensed, it is closer than it was. If I went back, said Reet, struck by a disturbing thought. If I went around only one time and went off toward where we came in, where my parents are. Your parents aren't there, said Qven. It's somewhere else. I'm just trying to understand, said Reet. I'm just trying to figure out how this is laid out. Qven made a whatever gesture, and he thought maybe he was angry with him. The prospect was distressing. He didn't want Qven angry with him. He wanted... what? Wanted Qven to like him? To be his friend? To be me? Something whispered in the back of his mind, and he ignored that, or tried to. I want to go look, he said. I think we should look and see. Qven made that careless gesture again, but didn't speak, and Reet thought that he was maybe still upset from before, but if that was the case, he wouldn't appreciate Reet prodding and poking at the thing that had upset him. So instead, he shoved off against the wall, back toward where they had come from, hoping to find the part of the spiral where the corridor branched away that they had entered from, or that Reet thought they had entered from. No doubt Qven would say that it was an entirely different hallway. He passed the scuff and Qven twice, with no sign of the way they'd come in. His heart began to race, and his stomach lurched. Were they gone? Past reaching? He took a breath, another, and then worked his way back around one more circuit. Qven ignored him as he passed him. He was curled up, hanging there, thinking, maybe, or Reet hoped so. This time, as he made his way around, he heard voices. Nan saying something unhappy, Mom and Mix Aftua speaking. He slowed himself against the corridor wall. He could go farther, could see them, make sure they were all right, tell them how things were going. And what would he say? We found a closed loop that's in a different place every time we go around it. Would that help? Would they even understand? Reet wasn't sure he understood. He turned back. "You're here now," said Qven, as he approached him on his fourth go-round. Good. He'd worried that he'd lost count, and there was no other way for him to know where he was. "You all right?" Qven was still cold in on himself. "No." That wasn't the answer he'd been hoping for. "Is there something I can do to help?" "No." "Should I?" "No." He waited. And waited. At length, Qven made a sniffling noise and uncurled himself just a bit. "I feel like there are doors somewhere, but I can't tell where they are. I don't know how to do this. They taught me to speak to humans and be very proper. They didn't teach me how to do this." "If we're in a different place every time we go around," said Reet, "then the place we came into this loop, or whatever it is different every time we pass it. And it is. I checked on my way back here. Where we came in is still there. The door is still open. But one time around, there's just wall. I don't. When you build things like this, when you make access tunnels, you put entrances in particular places." Silence from Qven. Then another sniffle. "Well, you have to put them somewhere. Otherwise there wouldn't be any." "Right," agreed Reet. "But what I'm saying is, there's usually a pattern to where things are." "But this isn't a thing anyone built," said Qven. "This is a mess the translator made." Another sniffle. "I think it's a mess they made out of something that was built," said Reet. "Remember, they told us that there were passageways or whatever that needed maintenance and repair. It's something built. It has a pattern to it, or it had a pattern before it got messed up." "How does that help now?" asked Qven, a voice plaintive. "We can figure it out." Reet couldn't keep his frustration, his own distress, out of his voice any longer. "The pattern is still there. It's just messed up. We can still find it. Listen. I went down the corridor where we came in, and Mom and Nana and Mix Aftua were there. They're fine, and that door was still open. I went around this loop, and that same part of the corridor was just a wall. But what if there's a door there?" "I can't tell if there's a door there." "But you can," he wanted to say, but didn't. "I don't think there's a door there," said Qven. "I can feel there's a door somewhere near, but I can't tell exactly where it is. Maybe it's a few more turns around this loop then, but I bet it'll be in the same place, the same part of the loop where we came in, except, not. So let's keep going, and we'll just check every time around." Qven seemed to think about that for a moment. "I suppose there's no reason not to," he said finally, but he didn't move. "Qven," said Reet, "tell me what's wrong." "Everything's wrong," said Qven, her voice miserable, more tears threatening. This is wrong. He meant, Reet thought, this strange spiral of a corridor. I'm wrong. Because you can't figure it out? Asked Reet, and then more sure of his guess. Or because you can almost figure it out? Because I tried to run away and let myself get attacked, he said. If I hadn't done that, none of this would have happened. If Mom and Nana and makes us two die, it's because of me. If you die, it's because of me. Reet had to think about that for a few minutes. I would still have happened. You didn't have anything to do with me existing, and Mom and Nana and Nick's Aftua are here because of me. And, a sudden, unwelcome thought, that ship and that hippie nationalist who attacked translated law, they are here because of me, definitely. So really, all of this is my fault. He was hoping Qven would say something like, oh, it isn't, or you can't blame yourself for this. But he was silent. And listen, I'm not saying it's good that you were attacked, because it's not, it's bad. But it happened, and it changed things. You got a raw deal, you've been treated badly, but you might as well use what you have, what you got from it, and one of the things you got from it might save our lives right now. Might, said Qven, and then he said, I am not really a princess. I'm just a messed up juvenile with no reason to exist. And then, voice fierce and strangled at the same time, not even a juvenile, not a juvenile, not an adult, not a princess, just a mess up. A mess up? Who can get us out of here? Reet pointed out. If there's even a way out. Look, he said, exasperated, and he had to admit, afraid. He was trapped here if Qven gave up. His parents were, and Mix Aftua. You can feel sorry for yourself later. I'll help you. We'll have tea and dumplings and cry. I promise. Sometimes it's good to cry, and I don't want to tell you not to feel what you're feeling. You have every reason to feel it. But right now, we have to get out of here. We have to at least try. Qven uncurled a little further, blinking behind a fat glob of tears that stuck to her eyes and the bridge of her nose. You promise? Tea and dumplings? I promise, Reet agreed. Qven sniffled and wiped her arm across her eyes, sending tiny spherical teardrops floating away from her face. And more pirate exiles? Definitely. It was actually really tempting at this moment to pull his handheld out of his pocket and start up an episode. We'll have a whole being sorry party. A party won't fix anything, Qven pointed out. Not something that big, Reet agreed, but let's get to the party and then we'll see what else needs to happen. He was, to his astonishment, sounding a lot like Mom when he really just wanted to curl up and cry himself. All right, said Qven, making an obvious effort to focus on the task at hand, to be calm, or at least to seem calm. Show me where you think the door will be. This way. He led him to the stretch of corridor where a few rounds back he'd found the place they'd come in. It was just blank wall, and they had nothing to mark it with except its distance from the scuff that Reet had noticed. That would be enough though, said Qven. We pass the scuff, and I start trying to feel for a door. They went 6 rounds, finding only blank wall to Reet's view, and no door that Qven could sense. On the 7th, Qven straightened and frowned. Door, he said, surprised and hopeful. What's beyond it? Asked Reet, remembering him saying back in the committee room that there was not even nothing outside. A room, said Qven. And someone's there. 2 someone's. Her frown deepened, and the wall opened. Inside the room, floating was the assistant to the human committee member who'd been in a mobility chair. She now floated with an air of ease, her arms and legs long and sinuous, clearly at home in low gravity, and not far off, the human-looking AI who had been observing the hearing, the ship, Qven. "Well, look at that," said Qven. "It's our wayward children. I was wondering if you'd be coming along." Qven. Somewhere. "You are Qven," I said. "You've killed more people than I have." "Far more," Qven agreed, with a barely noticeable smile. "You have very little chance of catching up to me." "That's all right," I said, after a moment of thought. "I don't think I want to." "So, Qven," said the other person in the room, "you can come and go between the pieces of the committee chamber. Qven had hoped that you would." Shirked in beside me, clinging to the edge of the doorway, Reet said, "We left my parents in another piece." "Is there anyone in the wall here?" I asked. I wanted to look at them if there was. The trapped mech had been interesting, and the thought of a human, caught that way, reminded me of the Middles, of taking bodies apart, when I had been safe, when everything had been the way it should. "In the wall?" asked the sinuous person, clearly appalled. "The committee member for the GEC is." Reet made an odd, unhappy expression. "Stuck in the wall, back where my parents are." "That explains some things," said Qven. "As soon as you made that door, I started receiving a signal that really did seem to be from the committee member from the GEC, but it's confused. The mech must be disconnected from the committee member and badly damaged." "It still moves," I told Qven, "and makes noises, but I didn't make the door. I just opened it." "I was hoping that you could," said Qven, "because I was pretty sure that if you couldn't, we were all going to die." They smiled. "Not that that would mean much in my case. Most of me isn't here, but it would make for a dreadfully complicated violation of the treaty." "You know about the doors then?" I asked. "I know they exist," agreed Qven. "I know, or suspect is more accurate, that they're a manipulation of gate space." "That's all right then," said the sinuous person. "You already know how to manipulate gate space." "Not like this, I don't," said Qven. "And I need parts of myself to do it that aren't here and that I'm cut off from." "We should keep going then," I said, and explained about the passageway outside, the loop that was really a spiral. "Maybe there are more doors up ahead. Maybe one of them would take us back to where we were." "I greatly fear that where we were is where we are," said Qven. "But yes, you should keep going, the both of you. The more doors you open, the more chances I have to contact someone outside." "The GEC," began the sinuous person. "I felt the mech when you opened the door," said Qven. "I can't talk directly to it though, I just know it's there." "I don't know what translator did," I said. "I only know how to feel the doors and open them." "We are fortunate you can do that much," said the sinuous person. "Go on ahead and open what doors you can." "Let us know what you find," said Qven. "If you can. And oh, Reet, Shuid, a word before you go." Reet and I went back into the corridor. A dozen more rounds of the loop showed only blank wall where a door might have been. And, "Stop," I said. Reet scudded to a stop against a wall. "You all right?" "No," I admitted. "I didn't want to be here. I wanted to have a mom like Reet did, who would tell me everything would be fine and give me hugs and tuck me into bed, like the parents in the adventure dramas. I wanted to really be a princess, and live in a palace and have noble courtiers competing for my favor. I wanted to curl up in my bed with Tita standing in the corner of the room watching. And with a sudden, vivid physical yearning, I wanted to be back under the tented blanket, Reet curled beside me, watching pirate exiles of the death moons. Wanted to feel the warmth of him pressed up against me. Wanted... I was sweating. "Qven," said Reet, "we need to keep going." "What if it never stops?" I couldn't raise my voice above a whisper. "What if it just keeps going around and around and around?" "Did you ever do emergency drills?" he asked. "What?" "Emergency drills. They mostly don't show them on the dramas unless they're part of the story. It's like practice for when things go wrong, so when something bad happens, you know what to do." I frowned. "No, nobody ever said anything bad might happen." "But bad things had happened. Maybe it would have been good to practice." "So," said Reet, "pretty much every drill for any kind of emergency, they tell you to stay as calm as you can and concentrate on the things you're supposed to be doing to save your life or someone else's. Like, it's alright to be upset, you might be hurt, but the most important thing is to do what the drill is teaching you to do." "Did you have a drill for this?" I asked. "No," Reet admitted. "We didn't have a drill for translator Clade being attacked and breaking reality into pieces." His face did an odd thing, like he was holding something back. "Or anything like it." His face did the thing again. "I'm sorry," he said, "but it's kind of funny." I waited a few moments, and his expression straightened out again. "We didn't do a drill for this specifically, but we can take what seems useful from other drills." "Like Mix Arthur did," I realized. "With the orange things?" "Yes," Reet agreed. "So, the first thing is always stay calm." "I'm not calm," I pointed out. "If I were calm, we wouldn't be floating here talking. We just keep going on around and around until we found something." "Yes," said Reet. "Exactly." It took me a moment to see what he was saying. "Oh," I said. "All right." I pushed off the wall and sailed farther along the loop spiral. Reet followed. "What did Qven say to you?" He was silent for a moment. "Qven said that maybe we could match with a biomech, like the Gekus. She, he grimaced. He decided they are thinking about ways to use biomechs instead of making humans into ancillaries. And they think the Gek could maybe make a mech that we could match with instead of having to merge into another person." I felt a stab of what? "So," Reet continued, "you might be able to, you know." He seemed to be searching for words. "I might not have to be eaten by someone else," I said, still not sure what I was feeling, and then I remembered that Reet was the someone else in question. "If there's time," said Reet. "They need time to make them, and if we can convince, Qven said that the Presger translators really don't like the idea. They think it's horrible and disgusting for some reason." "But we're human," I pointed out, "so we don't think it's disgusting." "But we have to get out of here first," said Reet. So many times around, nothing but the blank walls. Nothing to think of but maybe I could eat a biomech. That might be Interesting, it might be safe. No one would be forcing me to melt into them. No one would be pushing me back, holding me down But no, of course no one would. Reet would be there and Reet wouldn't be there. That would be the whole point of the mechs, wouldn't it? I felt that feeling again that I couldn't identify, couldn't say if it was good or bad, it was just there and unignorable. I had been working up to facing the idea that I would match with Reet, that it might not be so bad. So far, Reet had been nice to be with, and safe. If I absolutely had to match with someone, it would be good for it to be Reet, and not someone like Sam who didn't care what I wanted or how I felt. But it would be better, wouldn't it, to not have to worry about any of that? To have a mech as part of me, instead of having to be submerged into Reet, his skin melting into mine. I was sweating again, and then my skin began to itch fiercely all over. I hate that, said Reet. Do you want me to get you back? I was about to say, yes, please, when I felt the door. Behind the door was a wall of not even nothing, not exactly cold and not really black, slicing across a corner of the room we'd been in with the committee. Ambassador Saymet was there, and the person who had attacked Translator La. Spherical globs of blood floated in the space, and Ambassador Saymet's white clothes were saturated with blood. The smell of it was instantly comforting. What happened? Asked Reet, alarmed. Someone got caught in the wall, I said, before Ambassador Saymet could answer. More or less, Ambassador Saymet agreed. It took her arm right off. I've slowed the bleeding and she's unconscious, but if we don't get help soon, she's done for. And with a bitter twist of her mouth she added, not that I'd grieve much over it. Can I see? I asked, and the ambassador made a gesture that seemed to be half resignation, half invitation. The person had one whole arm and one that ended not far below her shoulder. Someone, it must have been Ambassador Saymet, had tied a piece of bloody cloth really tightly around the remaining bit of limb. I could see the bone, the sliced end of muscles bunched around it, the ends of blood vessels. It was entrancing. Where's the arm? I asked. If we find it, can I have it? I can't touch it, said Reet, before the ambassador could answer, and I looked over to where he floated, near the expanse of not even nothing. No, of course you can't, said Ambassador Saymet. It's nothing, not even space. There's nothing to touch. Nothing can get through it, said Reet. If you could make a wall out of it on purpose, I mean. You can't make anything out of something that isn't there, said Ambassador Saymet sharply. Did you practice? I asked the ambassador. Did you do a drill for someone getting their arm cut off? Yes, I did, said Ambassador Saymet. Have you found anyone else? Mom and Nana and Mix asked Tua, I said, and we found Qven and the person like a fish. Batonen, said the ambassador. Can you find a way out of here? I don't know, I admitted. I can feel doors and I can open them. The passage outside seems like a loop, but it's a spiral. We've been going along looking for doors. Ambassador Saymet looked more closely at me and then made a warning gesture. Keep your distance. I don't want to stress the treaty any further than it already has been today, and I have no intention of becoming a Presger translator. He doesn't want to be you, said Reet with surprising heat. So just leave him alone. Then there should be no trouble with her keeping her distance, said Ambassador Saymet. I corrected. I'm E, and I'm going to match with a biomech. Qven said I could. But I regretted saying it as soon as the words were out of my mouth. Ambassador Saymet closed her eyes. Amma ad preserve me, she muttered, opened her eyes again and said, you can keep going around the spiral. You should, but I'm not optimistic. If anyone could have come for us, they would have already. Either translator Dla wrenched us completely away from the universe, or anyone who would be rescuing us is busy doing something else, like dealing with a ship that might be threatening the Central Treaty Administration facility. Death to the Fen oppressors, said Reet, ruefully. Lovely friends you have, said the ambassador. You're the one who brought them into the committee room, Reet pointed out. Not me, not Qven, not my parents. Ambassador Saymet looked like she wanted to argue with that, to say something sneering or insulting, but she said nothing. Enae. Somewhere. Up close, the committee member for the Get's mech was an even more pitiful thing, limp wilted limbs and eye stalks emerging out of the wall. Part of the blobby body, with 3 more limbs and an eye stalk, these twitching occasionally. Where the biomech met the wall, some sort of bluish fluid seeped and clung. I'm so sorry, Enae murmured. Why was he sorry? A memory seized here. The sensation, the sight, the smells, the physical feeling of sitting by grandmaman's bedside near the end. The ambassador for the Gek had reminded Enae of her grandmother, and now, seeing this mech injured, Enae knew it wasn't the committee member himself, knew it was a remotely controlled mech, but all her experience of the Gek had been the mechs, and it was difficult not to think of them as the actual Gek. But it wasn't. It was just a biomech. I'm sorry, she said again. You didn't ask for this. You were just doing what the committee member told you to do, and look where you ended up. She was seized with the desire to do something, anything, to make the pitiful, injured mech more comfortable. There, whispered the mech, and one of its limbs twitched. Lit one. There. Committee member? Asked Enae, quietly. Maybe she'd hallucinated the whisper. To eat some. Is there? Who is there? It's me, Enae Aftua, and Ms. and Nix Troid. Reet and Qven were here, but Qven opened some kind of door and is looking for a way out. I don't know where anyone else is. What's going on? Asked Edgemin. Is the mech talking? I think it's the Get committee member, said Enae. Not enough to bring any to more than speak to you, whispered the mech. Kiss any it? We're fine, we're all fine, said Enae, feeling tears well again. She blinked them away, but they stuck to her eyes. The mech's limbs thrashed again, and then it said, in that same whisper, Better. This should be better. Much better, agreed Enae. Can you get us out of here? Translator Dla has done this, whispered the mech. We don't know where Translator Dla is. The committee member for the Presger says, if they undo this without knowing exactly what it is the Translator Dla has done, they may kill all who are trapped. They did not know if anyone was trapped or if all were dead. The station is... that part of the station is not right. Also, the siblings of Ikipu, their ship is still here, and still they threaten the station. Silence, more twitching. Then, you say the child, Qven, has opened a door. "This is not possible," says the committee member for the Presger. "I don't know what to tell you," replied Enae. "I saw him open the door, and he went through it, along with Reet." "Wait," whispered the mech. By now, Pt.3 and Qven had come closer. "He must have been trying to talk to us for a while," said Enae, "but we couldn't hear anything until I got really close." "Maybe it is possible," whispered the mech. "Maybe it is possible." And the committee member for the Presger did not want to think it was. "You are perhaps in danger from the children, but you must bring them to me. You must bring Qven here." Past the door that Qven had opened was a blank-walled corridor that curved off to the left and right. Enae tried to remember if she'd seen Reet and Qven go in a particular direction, but try as she might, she had no real memory of that particular detail. It was up to here then, and she might choose wrong. She often had chosen wrong in the past, but there was nothing for it. She took a deep breath and went left. The corridor, as they went along, twisted and turned oddly, and Enae seemed to push herself along it forever, until she realized she'd passed the same scuff on the wall 3 times. Impossible. There'd been no exits, no doors, not even the door Enae had come through, which should have been there. Enae should have passed it if this was just a big loop. But the door closed behind here. Where had it been? Where had Reet and Qven gone? There was no point in panicking. None. Whatever was going to happen would happen. Enae just had to do whatever it was she was supposed to do. She'd always done whatever it was she was supposed to do, but what was she supposed to do now? First of all, make sure she really was looping around. She reached into her bag and found the wrapper of a snack that Qven had eaten at some point. That would do. There wasn't enough of an air current to blow it far. She held it out and let it go. It hung, drifting just slightly. Now, go forward, or backward, it didn't matter which, and honestly she was losing track of which was which to begin with. Another round of corridors, and she came upon that distinctive scuff again, and the bright green snack wrapper. Filled with despair and anger, Enae reached out to grab the offending trash. Her hand passed right through it. She had to do it 3 or 4 times more to believe it had actually happened, but it had. Her hand had gone right through the wrapper, and even the air that the passage of her hand had disturbed didn't seem to reach it. What was going on? She thought about what the committee member for the GEC had said about what translator Dla had done in that moment before they'd been stabbed. Clearly something inexplicable and indescribable had happened, and things weren't behaving like Enae thought they should, not even like the Presger translators seemed to think they should. So this was... what was it? She went forward 1 more turn, and still her hand passed through the wrapper. So the next time, she went backward 2 turns, and this time, her hand closed around the wrapper, crumpled it with a satisfying crinkly crunch. The universe was twisted up. All right. She retraced her path backward along the loop of corridor and found the door she'd come out of right beside the distinctive scuff and the snack wrapper, where it hadn't been the last 5 turns. "It's a spiral," she murmured to herself. "It's a spiral," she called, so that the others could hear her. "It looks like a closed loop, but it's a spiral." Pt.3 put her head out of the door. "Did you find Reet and Qven?" "Not yet. I don't know which way they went, and I don't know how far the spiral goes." She took a breath and swallowed. "I'll keep going." Several more turns along the way, there was another open door, and in the space beyond hung Betonen and the ship Qven. "Did you find the children?" asked Qven when Enae came into the room. "The committee member for the Gex biomech is doing something, but I can't tell what." "Yes," agreed Enae. No, I haven't found Reet and Qven, but the biomech is communicating with the committee member, who's getting instructions from the Presger translators." "Oh, good," said Betonen with relief. "Reet and Qven have been here and gone on." Enae said, "The committee member wants me to bring Qven back so he can receive instructions or information, I'm not sure." "I'll get them," said Betonen, and swam out of the room and into the corridor. Enae, who'd been proud of how well she'd handled moving around in microgravity, suddenly felt clumsy and graceless. "She's been restless ever since the children opened the door," said Qven. "Shall you and I go back to where the mech is and see what else we can learn? Or better yet, maybe we can see what's on the other end of this spiral. Or at least I can. It's no real difficulty if anything happens to the part of me that's in here. You should probably stay with the others." Enae frowned. "You didn't say that to Betonen." "I didn't have time," said Qven with a sardonic quirk of the mouth. "And besides, we'd already been having that conversation before you arrived. She's probably faster than I am, and more likely to catch up to the children." Enae said, "I'll come with you." Qven was profoundly disturbed by the snack wrapper. "It shouldn't be doing that," said the ship. "I don't like it either," said Enae. "Why didn't you mark every turn?" "I didn't have anything else," which wasn't entirely true. She still had her bag strapped to her body, and there were various things in that bag. But in fact it hadn't occurred to her to do that. And it would get awfully cluttered, I think. Said Qven. "No doubt." They went around, stopping only to call a brief reassurance to Istvar and Etchemin and the mech, until Enae's hand closed around the bright green snack wrapper. "This is as far as you came?" asked Qven. "I went one farther, actually," Enae said. "It was the same." And it was the same for the next 4 rounds of the loop. But on the 5th... "It's different," said Enae, frowning, trying to understand what it was she was seeing up ahead. It looked as though something red and white and brown was stuck to the wall that ended the corridor. "What is it?" She pushed off the wall to bring herself closer. "Don't!" Qven grabbed her arm, slowing her, spinning them both around. "There's gravity there." "It might not really be there," Enae pointed out, "like the snack wrapper." "Not a good assumption," said Qven. "It's translated law," Enae realized. The thing she'd seen at the end of the endless corridor resolved itself in her mind. "It's gravity, and that's translated law lying on the ground. We have to go there, we have to help them, and we have to find out what they did to make this happen, and if they can undo it." "I imagine it's easy enough to get there," drawled Qven. "Just go forward until you're going down. Getting back out, though, is a whole other problem." "You stay here," said Enae. "I'll call back to you. Up to you, whenever, and let you know." "I think you have that backward," said Qven, reaching one hand out to the corridor wall, slowing their drift toward translated law even further. "If you fall down and break your neck, that's the end of you. But if I fall, well, it's no particular problem for the rest of me, and I suspect this part of me is a bit more durable than you, to begin with." "Maybe," said Enae. She hadn't thought of any of that. She just wanted to help get them all out of there. "I guess you might be right." "I know I'm right," Qven said. "We're getting too close for my comfort. I'm going to push you back, and when I—" And suddenly, up and down existed again, and Enae was falling. Reet. Somewhere. Reet and Qven emerged into the loop of corridor to find Betonen waiting for them. "We found Ambassador Saymet," said Qven, "and the person who stabbed translator La. Their arm is missing." "You'll need to come back to where the committee member for the Gex mech is," said Betonen, with no preamble, no response to what Qven had said. "It's communicating with the committee member who's passing information from the Presger translators. They say they need to talk to Qven." Reet frowned. "Why?" "They think there's something Qven might be able to do." "All I can do is open doors if they're already there," said Qven. "But if the mech is communicating with a committee member," Reet realized, "then there's an opening to the regular universe somewhere, otherwise the message wouldn't get through." "Just so," agreed Betonen. "But if there'd been a door there, I would have felt it," argued Qven, "and opened it." "Maybe the mech itself is the passage," suggested Reet. "It's stuck in the wall. Maybe the other side is somewhere else." He had been thinking about the looped passage, about the way the doors appeared in the same place every time. There has to be something at one or the other end of this corridor. It's a made thing. There's a logic to it. "Presger logic," Betonen pointed out, "which sometimes seems like no logic at all." "It's just some kind of logic," argued Reet. Betonen gave an elegant rippling shrug. "Qven should go back and talk to the mech." Qven should, not Qven and Reet, and he didn't want to be apart from Qven. There wasn't time to think about his own wants. This was an emergency, a crisis, and lives depended on everyone doing the right thing. "You go," he said to Qven. "I still want to see what's up ahead." Qven looked doubtful for a moment, even offended, and then he said, "All right." "Be careful," said Betonen, and swam off along with Qven. It had felt so dramatic, so final when he'd floated off in the opposite direction from Qven and Betonen, but he met them coming around, of course. Neither Qven nor Betonen acknowledged him, which felt both oddly right and also insulting. "There's a snack wrapper here," he said as they sailed by. "It wasn't here before." Qven looked back, but didn't reply, and he and Betonen were lost around the curve of the passageway. And on ahead he met them again, and again. He tried not to stare as Qven went past, tried not to feel whatever it was he was feeling. Hurt, abandoned, alone. But he was used to being alone, wasn't he? Eventually, of course, Qven and Betonen were gone from the corridor. He didn't see them go through the door that led to the fraction of room where his parents were, and Mix Aftur, and the mech, half in and half out of the wall. But they were gone, and that was where they had to be by now. And so he went around and around the loop of corridor, the same stretch, over and over again. Nothing different, nothing to occupy him, but his own thoughts. There would be a mech for him. That might be all right. He thought of walking the pipeways back on Rulrus Station with another body, one as flexible as the mech he'd seen in the committee chamber. All those limbs, all those eyes, that could be really useful. He might find in the end that he liked that. Qven would probably like it too, and that was a good thing. He thought of her story of being attacked, of the attempt to force him to match, and no wonder he didn't want to merge with anyone if he could avoid it. It was so completely understandable, and Reet was glad, he really was, if there was some way for Qven to survive and not be forced into something he found so terrifying and unpleasant. But it would have been nice. It would have been nice to finally have someone who understood his impulses and desires, who shared them, somewhere he actually belonged. Just like always, the thing he wanted would hurt someone else, so he could take good enough and keep on going the way he had been. Maybe he could make good enough into pretty nice actually, even if it wasn't the thing he yearned for. It was Qven he yearned for. Not just anyone he might merge with, but Qven specifically. And maybe that was because they'd spent hours and hours eating cakes and watching pirate exiles of the Death Moons. And maybe that was why Teacher had let them do that, in the hope they would like each other enough to want to match. And maybe there was some other Presger translated juvenile out there he would like just as much. But it was Qven he'd spent time with, and Qven who'd trusted him with the story of what had happened to him. What would that be like? To merge with someone you didn't like, didn't trust, who didn't like you? Surely the adult who resulted would be a mess, a mass of self-hatred. And what if they couldn't get out of here in time? If whatever the Presger translators had done to him and Qven wore off, and it was match or die? And what if Qven would rather die? There was no point in thinking too hard about distant what-ifs. There had to be an end to the spiral. It couldn't possibly go on forever, could it? There had to be a place where he couldn't go any farther, or, he feared for a moment, a place where he came again, to the door where his parents and Nyx Athtua were, proof that there was no entry and no exit from this place. But 2 turns of the loop farther, the corridor ended in a blank wall. Just a wall. The same, somewhat dingy white as the rest of the corridor. Flat, no door, no controls, no signs. But it hadn't been there before. Reet reached forward to touch it, to make sure it was really there. He couldn't get near it. Every time he pushed himself toward the wall, every time he got close to it, he found himself propelled away. The experience was disorienting. A sudden, panicked flail, as he felt like he was falling, like there was, for an instant, an up and down, and then the next instant, he was drifting in microgravity again. It wasn't the same as the not even nothing he'd tried to touch in the room where Ambassador Saymet was. It wasn't a normal artificial gravity boundary, because he should have still had his momentum from falling once he'd crossed back over into microgravity. He should have sailed toward the curve of wall behind him, but instead, he was just drifting. What was this? Maybe Qven would have understood what this was, or at least sent something useful, but Qven wasn't here. As he hung there, considering the futility of anything he could do, of his being here at all, a spot on the unreachable wall appeared, faint at first, and then darkening and spreading, slowly, almost but not quite imperceptibly. Fascinated, Reet stared at it. It was a dull red, almost like a bloodstain. As Reet watched, the stain grew slick and shiny, and suddenly some of the shine gathered itself into a blob that shot toward Reet, and then, crossing some boundary, slowed, wobbled, drifting into a shivering sphere. Reet reached out one finger to touch it. Blood. No question. Why was blood coming through the wall? Why was any of this happening? How could any of this make any sense? But no, there was no point panicking. Stay calm. Where would blood be coming from? The person who'd stabbed Translator Dla had lost her arm, sliced off by the wall of not even nothing, Ambassador Saymet had said. That arm had to be somewhere. Did an arm have enough blood in it to soak through a wall? Probably not. But that arm had stabbed Translator Dla, so where it was, likely Translator Dla was. Another drop of blood shot toward Reet, then slowed, wobbling. Translator Dla had done this. Translator Dla was probably the only way it could be undone. Translator Dla was at the center of this structure. Translator Dla had been stabbed, and here Reet was, at the end of the spiral passageway, watching blood drip from a wall that shouldn't be there, that he couldn't reach. "Gran!" he shouted. But there was no answer. He had no idea if anyone could hear him, if his voice could reach all those rounds of the looped passage, and anyway, Qven was way back in the room where Reet's parents were, talking to the mech. Or he should be by now. "Qven!" he shouted again, and turned and pushed himself back along the passageway as quickly as he could. Qven. Somewhere. "Qven," said Mom, when she saw me come in, Bretonin behind me. "Where's Reet?" "He wanted to see what was at the end of the passage," I told her. "He's all right." "Are you all right?" asked Nana. "You don't look happy." I made my face smile. "I'm fine," I said, as brightly as I could. "I'm supposed to talk to the mech." "It can only speak very quietly," said Mom. "You'll have to get very close and listen very carefully." "Did you and Reet have an argument?" asked Nana. "Men," said Mom. "What would we argue about?" I said, still bright. "I'll go talk to the mech." I pushed myself closer to where the mech emerged from the wall, limbs twitching. "Hello," I said. "This is Qven. I'm here." "Qven," whispered the mech, and Mom was right. It was very quiet, and I had to put my head very close to the mech's body to hear. "A committee member for the Presger speaks to me, and also the part of translated law that was not in the committee chamber. They ask me to tell you these things. You must find translator Dla, and you must discover what it was that translator Dla did in the moment they were stabbed. Translator Dla knows what was intended, but it seems that what was intended and what happened are two different things. The committee member for the Presger and translator Dla themselves can guess at what that difference is, but they do not know enough to put things to rights in a way that will not be destructive to the station or to the people who were in the committee chamber. So they tell me. So they tell me? Does that mean something? Is translator Dla there with you? I asked. I didn't know why I cared or why it mattered. Translator Dla is here and speaks to me. I operate this mech that speaks to you. I convey your words to the committee member and the translator. I convey your words. They couldn't hear me then. Only committee member Agagag could hear me. I didn't know why that mattered to me, but somehow it did. Well, I'm here and listening. What do they want me for? The translator says someone is required to examine the pathways from the inside. It must be done by an adult. And to be an adult, you must match. But you must match with something that can communicate with the committee member and the translator, so that you can tell them what you find, and they can instruct you. They say, therefore, that you must merge with this mech with which you are now speaking. At first, I was sure that I had heard incorrectly. What? You must merge with this mech, they say, so that you can pass information and take instruction from them. Match with the mech. Reet said that the idea of merging with a biomech was deeply offensive to translated law, something they would never countenance. And this mech, in particular, was badly damaged, half in, half out of the wall, twitching and leaking. How about if I just tell you how things are here? I asked. The translator does wish for you to do that, replied the mech in its low, strained whisper, that they insist that you will not be able to know what needs to be known unless you do this thing. There are doors here, I said. I can open them. I have been opening them. It's a spiral that looks like a loop. Reet went to see the end of it, if there is one. The mech didn't answer right away. Then, Nix Athtur said you had opened doors, and I had said so to the translator, but they did not believe. They said it was not possible. It is possible because I've done it, I insisted. It is not enough, replied the mech. You must do more than open doors, and you must find translated law to know what more it is you must do. You must do this quickly. The Ikipi ship still threatens and cannot be dealt with until this situation is resolved. I frowned, though I didn't think the mech could see my expression. But it takes days to match. They will be able to speak to you while it happens. You will be able to do as they wish while it happens. They say, Translator Dla wishes to remind you that you did not wish to be eaten by anyone, and there is not anyone in this mech to be eaten by. It is ideal for you. It's half in the wall, I pointed out. It's badly damaged. There might not even be much mech there anymore, even once it's freed. Translator Dla suggests this is only so much the better for you, as you did not wish to merge at all in any event. Also, many lives are at stake, not merely the lives of those inside the committee chamber. A pause. Translator Dla would inform you that the treaty itself is at stake. The treaty was everything. The treaty was why we existed to begin with. The way that Reet had talked about the treaty, the way that it was talked about in Pirate Exiles of the Death Moons, you would think that only the treaty stood between all humans and certain death, which maybe was true. But then again, a lot of things in Pirate Exiles of the Death Moons wasn't exactly accurate, according to Reet. If I do this, I said, will you agree that Reet and I are human? After a moment, the mech said, Translator Dla is angry and expresses disappointment that you would choose a time like this to pursue your own individual interests, when so much else is at risk. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Mom and Nana and Bretonen, who'd been hanging back, trying not to seem like they desperately wanted to know what the mech was saying to me, started and stared in my direction. I could say the same to translated law, I said. After all, if things are so desperate, why would the translator hesitate to grant me this one thing? What are they saying? Asked Nana. They want me to match with the mech in the wall, I told them, and conveyed what the mech had said to me. But, Mom began, and then, Qven dear, excuse me if I'm being too personal, but I thought you and Reet were supposed to. She trailed off, unsure of how to say what she wanted to say, I suppose. That's what they want, I said. I think they've been hoping if we were together enough, we'll want to do that, and then they won't have to worry about us anymore. I wanted to say, I don't want to do that with anybody, but for some reason, I didn't. I'm a disappointment, I said. There's no place for me, except with Reet, and that was by accident. Oh, Qven, said Mom, and she reached her hand out as though she were going to touch me, and then stopped. You are not a disappointment. No, I am, I told her. I was supposed to match with translated law, so they could keep on living instead of dying of old age. And translated law is important. I was supposed to be important. Qven, said Bretonen sharply. My people live on space stations, in ships and habitats. There's always a possibility of an accident or some damage to a habitat that will kill many people. And we're taught from small that the most important thing is doing whatever it takes to prevent such accidents. But when they happen, sometimes the only way to save everyone else is for someone to sacrifice themselves or others to secure the rest of the habitat. You think I should sacrifice myself to save everyone? I said. Wait, I'm not finished. The problem is, sometimes, sacrificing yourself is the wrong thing. Sometimes a sacrifice won't really save anyone. The problem is, when someone comes to you and says, only you can save us by sacrificing yourself, how do you know they're right? And how do you know they're telling the truth and not just trying to get you to do something that would be convenient for them? If they're telling the truth, if they're right, then yes, you should do it. But are they? I frowned. Translated law wouldn't agree to admit Reet and I were human if I matched with the mech. If it was really a question of the treaty, if they were really desperate, would they do that? It doesn't tell you everything, said Bretonen, but it tells you something. I needed someone to tell me the truth. Who had ever told me the truth? Who had I ever been able to rely on? Reet. Reet had never lied to me that I knew. Reet had cared how I felt about things, but Reet wasn't here. Mom and Nana were here, and I didn't think they would lie to me, and they seemed to care about me, but I was sure that was only because they cared about Reet, and they didn't know the things I needed to know. I wanted Reet to be here. Reet wasn't here. Who else did I have? Who else could I depend on to tell me the truth and not hide things from me? I went back over to the mech. I want to talk to teacher, I said. There was a long silence. Then the mech said, They have withdrawn. I hear them faintly. I think they argue. Why are they arguing? Why are they arguing with me? The treaty depends on this, they said. They said I needed to do this quickly. I do not know, said the mech. I do know that if you were one of our own hatchlings, you would be wise not to trust adults too near you. It is only your catchmates who will be there through everything, those few who have survived childhood with you. But humans are different, and this is a dangerous and difficult situation. I'm not human, I almost said. But I was, wasn't I? I was claiming I was. I didn't want to say anything else, but translated law and committee member Thrill might hear me. I don't have clutchmates, I said instead. And suddenly I felt very alone, even though Mom and Nana and Betonen were right there in the room with me. I wanted Reet. If Reet were here, you wouldn't be so alone, I thought. And then, if you were Reet, you wouldn't be alone. Qven. It was Mom. What's happening? I told them I wanted to talk to my teacher, and now they're arguing with each other about it. When did you last have food? Asked Mom. Before the committee meeting, I said, and I tried to remember. That was... Mom said something sailing toward me, a thing in a papery wrapper. That's the best we can do right now, she said. Qven, said the mech. Your teacher is here. Enae. Somewhere with gravity. Something hard slammed into Enae and knocked the breath out of her. She lay there, pressed to that hard surface, trying to catch her breath through the shock and the pain of impact. Mix, Athtor, said a voice, and Enae tried to gather his thoughts to understand what was happening. Mix, Athtor, are you all right? Qven. It was Qven asking. Yes, Enae said. And then, no. And then, wait. She tried to push herself up and discovered that her left wrist wouldn't take any weight, and that she was lying in a pool of blood. Her hands, her clothes, presumably the side of her face which ached from the impact, but also felt cold and wet. She made a small noise in the back of her throat, swallowed. This is a lot of blood, she said senselessly. Yes, agreed Qven. Are you all right? Enae asked, still not sure why she was saying anything at all right now. I'm fine, replied Qven. It's their hand on his shoulder now. As I said, I'm a bit more durable than you are. No offense. None taken, replied Enae. My wrist is, and my knee, I think. I'm more worried about your head, said Qven, and crouched in front of Enae to look into her eyes. I'm all right, Enae protested, though she almost laughed at the ridiculousness of saying that when she was half lying on the ground, bruised and aching and covered in blood. Not his, she didn't think. This is translated glass blood, she realized. Mostly, agreed Qven, helping her to sit up, and once he was leaning against a wall, cradling her left arm, she managed to get her thoughts together and understand where they were. This place had 3 perfectly ordinary-seeming walls. The fourth was the not even black of not even nothing. Beside that non-wall lay an arm, neatly severed just below where a shoulder should have been. Not far from the lifeless hand, a knife lay in the pool of blood that spread out from where translated La lay. Are they dead? She asked. I'm hoping not, said Qven. But look up. She did, and saw a ceiling. She blinked. That wasn't there before. Oh, I'm sure it was, said Qven. Just not from the direction we came in. So, began Enae, and found he couldn't quite marshal any sort of coherent thought. So, what happened? And how do we get out of here? And then again, with sudden sick dismay, that's a lot of blood. Most human bodies have about 5 liters of blood in them. You'd have to add a little more for the arm. She wasn't sure what to say. Do Presger translators have more? Or less? About the same, I think, said Qven, unperturbed. But of course she, Enae decided. She had said before that she was only one small part of herself, just one body of many, and those just part of a ship. It really does look like the translator has bled out. But you don't think they're dead? Enae hadn't thought her confusion and dismay could get any worse, and yet, here she was. Presger translators aren't human, said Qven. Translator Dla might look dead. She cast a glance over at the body that lay on the floor, its white clothes soaked in blood. They definitely look dead, but that's no guarantee of anything with Presger translators. So, what do we do? I'm not sure there's anything we can do, said Qven. Dla probably meant to isolate themselves from the attacker, and the attacker from anyone else. But something went wrong. That this isn't all of Translator Dla, Enae pointed out. They have at least one other body, right? And that part of them wasn't in the committee chamber. That part of them isn't here either, said Qven. If we're lucky, Translator Dla will be working to undo this, but there isn't anything we can do, especially if this part of Translator Dla is inert. Inert? Repeated Enae dubiously. It's a Presger translator thing, said Qven. I have a little experience with this sort of accident. You've dealt with people trying to murder Presger translators before? Yes, actually. At any rate, there's nothing we can do now. But wait. Enae closed her eyes. She couldn't find any way to argue with what Qven had said, but the idea of just sitting here, covered in blood, waiting for rescue or waiting to die, didn't seem right. She didn't like it at all. Are there any emergency enclosures here? She asked. Emergency enclosures? There were some where I was with Reet's parents. Well, one of them was sliced in half, but if there are some here, there might be something useful in them. Food, first aid supplies. She thought a moment longer. When we start to run out? Qven shrugged. I don't really need any of those things. Or I do, but not as badly as you might. You can have whatever you find. She sat down beside Enae and leaned against the wall. None of that will make a difference to Translator Dla either. Enae opened her mouth to argue, and then closed it again. She rose to her feet and went the length of the wall, leaning against it. Partway along was a panel that didn't quite fit into its place, and she pulled it aside. Here, she said, and tugged what she found out of the recess there. It was the sliced-off end of an emergency enclosure packet. Not much there, observed Qven. There are a couple of first aid correctives, she said, and part of a blanket. She limped over to where Translator Dla lay. Qven watched silently as he read the instructions on one of the correctives. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to do anything at all, not for Translator Dla, who lay still, unbreathing, soaked in their own blood. There had to be more than 5 liters of it. There was so much blood, and Enae took a breath. There was a wound on translator Dla's neck, just above their collarbone. That was bad. No wonder there was so much blood. No wonder they lay there as though they were dead. They had to be dead. That wound, all the blood, so much time had passed. She was panicking. That wouldn't do anyone any good. And Qven had said the translator wasn't dead, had seemed very sure of it. She peeled open the corrective and laid it down on the wound in the translator's neck. The corrective pooled, spread, and hardened. "It's doing something," she said. "Do we have any water?" She'd left her bag where it had hit the ground, and now she went over to rummage through it and see what might have survived the fall. "Water?" asked Qven, nonplussed. "The translator has lost a lot of blood. They'll need water." Qven stared at her a moment. "Whatever amuses you," she said. "Why are you even here?" Enae asked, as he pulled a half-empty bottle of water out of her bag. "The same reason you are," Qven said, carelessly. "I was in the committee chamber when translator Dla did whatever she did." "No, I mean..." Enae opened the bottle, poured a little water on her hand, and wet translator Dla's lifeless lips. "Why were you in the committee room to begin with? You don't seem like you care about anyone but yourself. Why would you care what happened to Reet?" "You're right," said Qven. "For the most part, I don't care about anyone but myself." "For the most part?" Enae echoed, wetting translator Dla's lips again. It didn't seem to be doing anything at all, but it was better than sitting there covered in blood doing nothing. "Sometimes getting what you want, or what you need, depends on others getting what they want or need. In this case, I very much need a satisfactory substitute for human ancillaries. The GEC seem to be able to supply that. Therefore, I support the GEC in ways that I hope won't harm any of my other interests. And the GEC, for their part, aren't acting out of pure altruism." "I know." Enae wished she had a cloth or more water, something to clean up all this blood. She thought things might be more bearable if they were cleaner and neater. "I suppose you hope that supporting the GEC here will make it more likely they'll give you biomechs." "Just so." Qven looked at Enae a moment, and then said, "And why are you here?" Another pointless wetting of translator Dla's lips. A glance at the corrective, which had gone opaque. Wasn't there supposed to be some way to tell what it was doing, how things were going? Enae didn't know, and it might all be futile. Translator Dla looked as much like a corpse as anything Enae had ever seen. "My family, or what there was of it, wanted me out of the way. So they sent me off on an errand that was sure to take me very far away from home for a very long time." "And what had you done to warrant that?" asked Qven. "Nothing," thought Enae. "I existed," she said. "Ah," Qven sounded just ever so slightly amused. "They sent you to find someone who was hopelessly lost, whose trail had gone cold decades ago. They knew, perhaps, that you were a determined and persistent sort of person who wouldn't come home until you had accomplished your task." Enae felt tears well, but she wasn't going to cry. She wasn't. "Yes. They underestimated you. They didn't expect you to actually find this lost soul. And having found her, why are you here now, Mix Earth Tour?" Why do you care? Snapped Enae. I don't, really. Just idle curiosity. I don't like boredom. I've had enough of it in my long life. I thought if I found anything, it would be someone long dead. I didn't think I would ruin someone's life. You saved their life, Max Astua. Pt.3 would have died if you hadn't realized what she was. What she was? Qven made a wave, gesturing her protest away. Whatever. In any event, if you hadn't found Pt.3, either Pt.3 would have died, rather horribly, I gather, or someone else would have been unwillingly absorbed into a new, adult Presger translator, and maybe they would have been found immediately after that and sent back to the Presger translators, or maybe they would have been able to hide wherever they were, but it would have been very bad for someone if it had happened. Far from ruining anyone's life, you either saved Pt.3's or that unknown human's. Personally, I prefer this particular set of events, since it's given me an opportunity to ingratiate myself with the Gek. So, thank you. Enae said nothing, only looked again at the corrective on translator Gla's neck, as though she could tell anything from it, and wet the translator's lips again. You know things about the Presger translators. You said you had a friend who told you things. That's true. The ship hadn't stirred from her careless lean against the wall. So, do you know anything that will help now? You said the translator wasn't dead. And she isn't, even if this body is. The rest of Translator Gla was outside the committee chambers, well outside, I'm sure. Even if this body is dead, the translator survives. But you don't think this body is dead? I do not, Qven acknowledged. But it's not like knowing that changes anything. That might as well be a dead body for all the difference it makes to us, unless you know of some way to put all the blood back inside it and wake it up. All the blood. So much of it. 5 liters of it. There's less blood, Enae realized. It was sort of shiny and puddled before. It still is in places, but blood does clot, you know, and dry out. I know, but Enae wiped the tiled floor beside her knees. What's under this floor? Reet. Somewhere. Around and around Reet went, along the looping passage, always the same. How many times had he made the circuit before he'd found that blood-drenched end? He didn't know, hadn't counted. Qven hadn't been with him to open any doors, so there was nothing to mark one round from another. He might be going nowhere, just around and around. Stay calm, he reminded himself. He'd said the same to Qven when he had been panicking. He remembered safety drills on Rorust Station, lessons when he'd first started walking the pipeways, about disasters and emergencies of the past, about how easy it was to panic and get lost and make a bad situation worse. He just had to keep going, and next time he would count so that he knew how much farther he had to go. He wished Qven were with him. Qven could tell him if there were doors along the way, could maybe tell him how many rounds of this circuit he still had to make. Qven's presence would be comfortable, comforting. He wanted to be with Qven. He was sweating. Maybe from fear or panic, that was the thing that happened. Or maybe not. Maybe whatever they'd done to him to keep him from being what he was, maybe that was wearing off. What if it wore all the way off and he died here? What if it wore all the way off and he melted into someone else, someone he didn't want to be, or who didn't want to be him? Qven didn't want him. There was no point thinking about it. They would get out of here, and Qven would get a biomech from the Gek, and Reet would too, and they could still be friends and watch pirate exiles of the Desmoons together. Away from here. It wasn't what Reet wanted, but it would be good. And on the next turn, there was an open door. In the state he was in, he was a danger to anyone he might meet, but he'd been going around this circuit for so long, looking for the first sign that he was getting anywhere, he needed to look into that door and see who was there, to see proof that he wasn't just pointlessly floating along, hopelessly lost. "Well?" asked Ambassador Saymet, when Reet pulled himself partway through the door. The person who had attacked Translator La still floated, unconscious. Just unconscious, Reet hoped. "I found something," said Reet. "I think I found Translated La, but I can't get to where they are. I need—" He stopped, aware that what he was about to say meant more than he wanted it to. "I need Qven." "Qven isn't here," said Ambassador Saymet. "I know," said Reet. "It's just—" What was he doing? He could maybe have talked to Mom about what he was feeling right now, about his fear, about his longing for something he couldn't have. But he would certainly not say anything about it to Ambassador Saymet. "Are you all right?" asked the ambassador. There was no trace of sympathy in her voice, but it was astonishing enough that she had even asked the question. "Oh, I'm fine," replied Reet. "Why wouldn't I be? This is such an enjoyable experience." Ambassador Saymet's lip curled. "If you're about to have some sort of breakdown, it won't help any of us." "It's your fault we're in this situation," Reet wanted to say, but he didn't. Not directly anyway. He knew that wouldn't be helpful, but he couldn't resist saying something. "Why did you bring Mr. Nutcarl here?" he asked. "Are you so naive?" asked Ambassador Saymet with contempt. "Surely you're aware that a group like the siblings of Hikipu is part of a network that funnels funds and other kinds of support to Hikipi insurgents, who use those funds and support to deal death and damage throughout Karoxane's system. They support Hikipi art and culture," protested Reet, though he didn't know why he was so indignant, except that they'd offered him a place to belong, one that had seemed to fit. Ambassador Saymet made a disgusted sound. "So what if they support Hikipi insurgents?" asked Reet. "Do you know what the Fen have done to the Hikipi?" "Some of it," acknowledged Ambassador Saymet. "Do you know how many innocent lives have been taken by Hikipi insurgents?" "Innocent lives?" repeated Reet. "You are Ratchai, and you are going to tell me about innocent lives?" Ambassador Saymet said nothing. "And if your people were treated the way the Hikipi have been, would you do any differently?" "Likely not," said Ambassador Saymet, "which is part of why I consider your association with them so dangerous. Even more so now I realize just how little you understand. They were using you, Pt.3. The Hikipi have split into factions. If they were ever anything but factions, unified by their opposition to the Fen. One faction had decided that the best way to bring everyone into line was to find a lost heir for everyone to support. They didn't care if that lost heir was real or not. They only cared if she was biddable enough for their purposes. You are a game piece, Pt.3. And the game they're playing with you was dangerous even before it became clear that you're not exactly human. So why not just tell the committee this? Why bring—" Reet gestured to the unconscious would-be assassin. "Why bring her into the hearing? It would have been a lot less trouble and a lot less dangerous to just explain." Ambassador Saymet closed her eyes and took a deep breath, as though she was working very hard to restrain herself from saying or doing something intemperate. "Do you think I am incompetent? I had explained and still there was every danger that the committee was going to decide in your favor. The Gek were determined, of course, the bear an old grudge that made their support for you, and more to the point, against me, a foregone conclusion. The human committee member is surrounded by advisors and staff with any number of dangerous agendas, and then the ships took an interest in the matter. They don't have an official voice on the committee. Yet, put in Reet. Yet, acknowledged Ambassador Saymet coldly. In any event, a presentation of the facts did not sway the committee, and so I must perforce convince them by a demonstration. You meant for this person to do something violent? Something dangerous? You did this on purpose? Not this. The ambassador waved one white-gloved hand, disdainful, but I knew the Hikipi would do something appalling. I had no fears of being unable to control them when they did act up. I am dangerous myself, in case you hadn't noticed, and translator Dla is more than capable of defending herself. I made sure the Hikipi had no access to anything more than a few moderately sharp utensils, which I did expect them to try to make some dramatic use of. I didn't expect things to turn out exactly this way. You underestimated them, Reet pointed out. Not by much, sneered the ambassador. By enough, said Reet. Listen to me. I don't want to have anything to do with what you call Hikipi insurgents. You call them patriots, I suppose, drawled Ambassador Saymet. I don't call them anything, insisted Reet, though he realized that wasn't entirely true. He had studied the history, knew the songs and poetry, the stories. It was difficult for him not to have some sympathy. You really don't care what the Fen have done to the Hikipi? I do not, replied Ambassador Saymet. The internecine squabbles of the uncivilized are not my concern, nor are they yours. My concern, and yours as well, is the treaty. If the treaty is broken, or otherwise abrogated, nothing so trivial as the difficulties between the Fen and the Hikipi will matter anymore. If you care about these Hikipi, you will protect them by protecting the treaty. That is where my duty lies, and yours. You were born to that duty, whether you recognize it or not. The Presger translators have no use for me, Reet informed her. They won't do anything but dispose of me immediately if the committee gives me to them. Ambassador Saymet made an uncaring wave with one hand. If they were going to cut your throat in the middle of the committee chambers, I would sharpen the knife for them. Not, she put in before Reet could speak, because I bear you any ill will, though you've given me precious little reason to think well of you. No, I act as I do because I have a duty, and because that duty protects all of humanity. Except the Hikipi, of course, snapped Reet, and then regretted it. He hadn't meant to be drawn into this particular argument. Look, I have no intention of going off to Canoxane and, I don't know, trying to claim some lost authority over a destroyed station. I'm not Hikipi. We've established that. I grew up in Zeusen. I have a family there and a job. Yes, I heard all this when I dealt with the Zeuseni jurists. It is irrelevant. You are what you are. Your duty is what it is. Duty. Reet wanted to keep arguing, but the argument would go nowhere, and now wasn't the time. He did have a duty just now, even if it wasn't what Ambassador Saymet seemed to think it was. I think I found translated La. So you said. Where is she? There's blood. It's falling through a wall at the end of the corridor. Falling through a wall? Ambassador Saymet repeated. There's gravity in the corridor. No, but I think there's gravity around the wall. I think it's a floor, and someone is bleeding on the other side of it. I can't get to it though, because the gravity pushes me away, and there's nothing to brace myself with to get close enough. What's at the other end of the corridor? Asked the ambassador, sharply. I don't know, Reet admitted. I'm headed back that way to see and to get Qven. Committee member Agagag's biomech is communicating, and they'd asked to speak to Qven, so we went back there. Right, snapped Ambassador Saymet. Why didn't you say so to begin with? I did, protested Reet, but the ambassador was already sailing out the door. Qven. Somewhere. I grabbed the paper-wrapped food out of the air as it sailed toward me. Mum was right. I was hungry. Teacher, I said, unwrapping the food. They're telling me that the only way to fix what translator Clade did is for me to match with this mech that's caught in the wall. I don't know if I should believe them. They've never cared about what happened to me. No, they never have, whispered the mech. Ah, now the translator and the committee member are angry with your teacher. They argue in a language I cannot understand. I think your teacher is also very angry. Qven, said Mom, isn't there anyone who raised you or protects you? I blinked and made a frustrated noise. It's not like with you, I said. Not like Reet had, not like in the shows. We didn't have parents to kiss us and tuck us in. We don't have that. And once I stopped being what they needed me to be, I guess I stopped mattering. You matter, insisted Mom. I know you matter to Reet. No, I said. I don't think I do. He's just good and generous because you taught him to be. Qven, whispered the mech. This is the situation. The ship the would-be assassin arrived on has threatened to fire on the central station of the Treaty Administration facility. I know, I said. That happened right before everything went wrong. For reasons that it would take too much time to explain just now, the ship cannot be fired upon or otherwise attacked. That was your teacher speaking, continued the mech. Your teacher continues. Suffice it to say that if translator Clade had not meddled with Central, if the committee were able to meet and give rulings, this would be a simpler situation to deal with. I can find the rest of the committee, I said. I found Ambassador Saymet and the person who stabbed translator Clade, but not their arm. That news troubles them, whispered the mech. I told them I could open doors. I said so before teacher came. I think they did not believe you, or they did not tell your teacher. Your teacher speaks again. Reconvening the committee would be a good start, but you must also find translator Clade and put them back into communication with themselves. The simplest way to do this, from translator Clade's perspective, is to merge with the mech, which translator Clade here can communicate with, and go to where the other half of translator Clade is. If you search for the translator, you may well find them, but it will likely take time we may or may not have. On the other hand, if you match with this mech, there will, so the translator hopes, be things you will be able to do and sense which you cannot now, and the task will be much easier. What about committee member Shrill? Asked Mom, who had floated up beside me and was listening intently. They are outside with us, replied teacher through the mech. They fled the moment they realized what translator Clade was doing. They cannot help. I can open doors, I said. Maybe I can do this other thing already. If you could, came the reply, you would already know where translator Clade was. Tell me the truth then, I said. What will happen to me if I match with this mech? Maybe nothing, came the reply. It may be that what we gave you to prevent matching is still in effect, and if you succeed, it will surely be painful, or at the least, uncomfortable. This mech was not made to match with, and it is badly damaged, much of it destroyed. There also may not be enough of it that is the right sort of thing to match with, and so the process might well be incomplete, and you might die. If it were whole though, it might be all right, I asked, thinking of Reet. It might be good enough to keep you alive, I suppose, said the mech, if it were in good repair, if it were made for the purpose. It's not what I would have wished for you. I thought you and Reet made a good pairing. Where is Reet? We were looking for translator Tla when you called me back, I said. He's still out looking. I wished he was here. I should have asked him to come with me. I'm sorry, began Mom, and then, no, I'm not sorry. I have to say, I think you've treated Qven here abominably, and if this is how you treat all your children, well, I don't even know what to say. We are not human, whispered the mech. But yes, even by our standards, Qven has been ill-treated. I was glad to see that Reet was someone who would be good for them. I corrected. I'm a princess in disguise. Like Gecko from Pirate Exiles, exclaimed Nana behind me. Reet loves that show. I do too, I said. Mom, teacher's been all right to me. That's why I asked for them, because they would tell me the truth. I knew translator Tla would just try to make me do whatever would suit themselves. Mom made a disgusted noise. And suddenly, I didn't feel so alone. It's true, Mom and Nana weren't my Mom and Nana, even though I wanted them to be. But they cared about me, and they cared what happened to me. And maybe that was only because of Reet, but did that matter? Reet had said that Mom and Nana and his maman took children into their house who needed a family. That Reet had been one of those children. Well, I needed a family, or I wanted one, and they cared. Maybe if I had matched with Reet, they would have hugged me and tucked me in, just like the parents in the shows, just like Reet said they'd done for him. I wanted it. I wanted it with everything in me. I wanted to be Reet, to have Reet's family, even the Sibs I'd never met. I wanted to watch Pirate Exiles of the Death Moons under a blanket tent and drink tea with Reet. As Reet. I was sweating. The itch I'd felt since I'd awakened and found myself a translated Tla with Chicha had faded. I knew suddenly that I could do it. I could match. I wanted to match. I wanted to match with Reet, to melt into him and become him, become us. We could spend hours searching the spiraling corridors outside. And maybe people would die, Mom and Nana among them, and even more would die if the treaty were broken, or if the ship threatening the treaty administration facility fired on the station. Is translator Tla telling the truth? I asked. Will I be able to know where translator Tla is if I match with this mech? A long pause. Qven, said Mom. There has to be some other way. The mech whispered, You might or might not be able to know where translator Tla is, though I think you will. I can't say if it will really fix things or not. And then the mech added, Your teacher was so long in replying because there was another argument that I could not understand. Teacher, I cried, what should I do? After another pause, the mech whispered, Translator Tla insists that you should do as they are telling you, that there is no other choice and far too little time to debate. Your teacher is arguing with the translator. I think they wish to put your teacher out of the room so that they cannot say anything more to you. If I can't talk to my teacher, I won't do anything, I said and crossed my arms. although I knew translated law couldn't see me. Maybe it was good they couldn't see me. Maybe I crossed my arms to defend myself. Maybe I wanted to curl into a ball and hide somehow. Now, they want me to pretend to be your teacher, said the mech. But I will not. You are human, we insist, and this is not how to deal with human hatchlings. It certainly isn't, said Mom, who was close enough to hear what the mech was saying. You should move away from me, I said. I'm dangerous right now. You won't hurt me, said Mom. I know you won't. The mech whispered again. Your teacher says, these are the things over which you have no control. The human ship that threatens the station, and the tangled translated law has made of that same station. The only way to undo what translated law did, without possibly killing everyone trapped within, is to find translated law. You can do nothing whatever about threatening the ship, but others will find that problem more tractable if this one is solved. That is how things are, and no choice you can make, large or small, can change that. But remember what I said to you before. Sometimes we have only the smallest choices, and we must take what we can get. Think of what it is you want, and think of what choices you do have. But think quickly. At any moment, the human ship could fire on the station, and lives will be lost, not to mention the possibility that the treaty may be violated. I already knew what I wanted. I wanted to be away from here, back in my rooms with Reet, and I wanted to match with Reet, even though it frightened me to think of it. So maybe I didn't want that. I wanted to be away from here, maybe on a ship, having adventures. The adventures in the shows weren't real, but people did go around in ships, and people did have friends, and maybe I could too. And maybe Mom and Nana and Maman wouldn't be my Mom and Nana and Maman, but maybe they would care about me, just a little. Could I make any choices that might get me that? How near as acting I was now? If I matched with this broken mech, it would be bad. I didn't think teacher wanted me to do it, and Mom and Nana definitely didn't. It might not be enough, teacher said, and I might die. But maybe not. Maybe the mech could be fixed after I matched with it, if I lived. But not if translated law had anything to say about it. Translated law would dispose of me the moment I was no longer of any use. I knew that, and Reet too. I will do it, on one condition, I said, my arms still crossed over my chest. You admit that Reet and I are human. A long silence, then. Translated law insists again that this is not the time for such foolishness. I didn't say anything, only waited. Our saying anything on the matter is pointless, whispered the mech eventually. Nothing will be determined until the committee can convene again. They won't argue with you about it, I said, though I wasn't certain about that. Committees argued all the time according to the shows. You say it now officially. I have witnesses here, Ms. and Mix Treat, and Bretonen, and committee member Agagag. That should be enough to make it official. I had no idea if it was, but it sounded right. Say you'll let me and Reet go and be human, and I do what you're asking me to. Otherwise, I won't. The translator is appalled that you would risk so much over your personal whims, whispered the mech. But they are not surprised, given your history. Oh, I felt that, as though the translator had struck me physically. How dare I? I had gotten us all into this mess by being wrong, by... I remembered Sam, screaming, dissolving bit by bit. Why? To teach someone some lesson? To cause as much pain as possible to someone? Maybe several someones, me included? I wanted to shout or translated law, to scream. I kept my mouth closed and waited. At last, said the mech, I am witness, and I recorded in the preliminary agenda of the committee to await notice by the other members. Translator Da and committee member Thrill admit that you and the hatchling Reet are human and not subject to their authority. Right, I said. No matter what happened now, they couldn't do anything to me. Only humans could, and I had humans who would help me. Mom, you have to move back, so I can do this. Are you sure you have to? Asked Mom. I don't think you should. I'm sure there must be some other way. No, I said. I have to. I didn't want to. Mom looked at me closely and then put her hand on my shoulder and kissed my cheek. She said, I don't want you to, but it's your choice. Tell us if you need anything. She pushed herself away from the wall. I closed my eyes. How should I do this? I didn't really know how to start matching on purpose. The only thing I could think of to do was reach out and touch the mech where it stuck out of the wall and wait to see what happened next. I opened my eyes again, reached out my hand for the twitching limbs of the mech, for what might be my death. Gran, came Reet's voice from the door. Qven, we think we found translated law. Enae, somewhere with gravity. Enae scrigged at the floor beside translated law's body with her good hand. It seemed smooth, unmarked by anything like a crack or a hole. There's surely a join, said Qven, coming to kneel beside her. Maybe there isn't, said Enae hopelessly. I don't see anything at all. It seems perfectly solid. But it isn't, said Qven reasonably. The blood is soaking through to somewhere, so either the flooring is absorbent, which is not a characteristic I personally would favor in a floor, especially one that sees as much use as the committee chambers must, or else there's some opening somewhere. I'd bet the flooring is laid down in sections, and there's a join here. If we can just... She stared closely at the bloody surface. Enae pushed herself up and limped over to where the dismembered arm lay and picked up the knife from beside the outstretched hand. This is just a utensil from the dining hall that's been sharpened somehow. Ah, said Qven, stretching out her own hand for the knife. Well thought of. She probed at the floor with the blade. Yes, this knife is homemade. It's not the sort of thing that takes much skill to do, though the right tools help. Surely the right tools are contraband here. Indeed they are, Mix Athtua, Qven agreed, still probing. And if you think that Ambassador Seimet Enae didn't know what this person was carrying, or didn't know at least in a general way what they intended, then I don't know what to tell you. That's been bothering me, admitted Enae. Ambassador Seimet isn't stupid, and she strikes me as the sort of person who checks everything twice and 3 times. Indeed, she is, said Qven. Ah, here it is. There's a join right here. It's very smooth and tight, but not perfect, as you noticed. We might as well try to open it further. We don't have much else to do. Did Ambassador Saymet expect all of this to happen? Asked Enae. All of this? Qven dug at the floor with the knife. Probably not. I don't doubt she was sure she could keep control of anything that happened. How arrogant, exclaimed Enae. Qven made a small amused noise. All the Miatna aha, generally speaking. And in this case, I suspect Saymet was a little desperate. Right now she is, and has been for quite some time, the sole authority on dealing with the Presger translators. And right now, with Rajai power fragmenting, she can't depend on being cousins with the usurper to remain that sole authority. If our wayward children are declared human, that will no longer be the case, will it? People will be able to go to someone besides her for advice or knowledge. Maybe cut her out completely. She'll tell you that it's only about duty toward humanity or some such nonsense, but there's a good bit of personal ambition and vanity involved, if you ask me. Did she say any of this? Oh, Saymet doesn't say anything to me, if she can help it, said Qven with a small satisfied smile. And I prefer it that way. Do you have anything in that bag to help with this? A water bottle. I didn't bring any utensils or anything we weren't supposed to. Oh! Enae pulled the comb out of the top of her braid and sat down beside Qven. I have this. She poked one tine of the pretty thing experimentally at the barely visible crack in the floor. She didn't think it would do much, except maybe snap in two. You have a friend who's a Presger translator, so Ambassador Saymet isn't the only one with a connection to them. I'm not human, the ship pointed out, and I don't exactly advertise that friendship. How could she not know? Everyone here knows everyone, and everyone watches what everyone does. You may have noticed, said Qven, that the Presger translators don't need to walk the hallways like the rest of us, or take shuttles anywhere. And, to be honest, I don't think my friend is entirely frank with their own people about their friendship with me. But you're... Enae realized she didn't think of artificial intelligences as people, despite Qven seeming entirely like a person. Your own people, no? You said that was why they sent you here. Yes, agreed Qven. It's not exactly a secret, you understand. We just don't talk about it much. You think we won't get out of here? Enae guessed, pausing in her fruitless scraping with her comb. That's why you don't worry about my knowing. No. Qven dug harder at the fine crack in the floor. The prospect of our two children being declared human rather changes the stakes, and I'm less worried about it becoming known. That said, she paused, knife balanced in one bloody hand. I doubt we're getting out of here. A moment of silence. Good, you aren't prone to hysterics. No, I'm not, Enae snapped, indignant. This comb isn't doing much good. This flooring is pretty durable stuff, agreed Qven, but I'm making at least a tiny amount of progress. She drove the knife hard into the crack, and it widened, just a bit. Oh, said Enae, maybe we can hold it open like that. Can you make enough space for me to put the comb into? May as well try, said Qven, and again jammed the knife down hard and then levered it, raising a bit of the flooring just a little more. And then the floor split, and Enae was falling again. And suddenly wasn't. Up and down was gone, and someone had hold of her, and Reet's voice was in her ear. Got you. You all right? Translator La? She gasped. Betonen has them, said Reet. I'm going to let go of you. Enae looked around. Qven floated not far off, looking unruffled, as though the floor hadn't just opened and spit them out into the same corridor they'd been going around and around in before, except now blood spattered the walls, and there were so many people. Betonen's sinuous arms and legs held Translator La and braced Betonen herself against a wall. I did it, exclaimed Qven, triumph in her voice. I made it all. You did, agreed Reet. And now we need to get back. There's not much time. Back was the same small room where Enae and Istra and Echimin had started, with the biomech trapped in the wall. The room was crowded now, with committee members and aides who must have been behind other doors unopened until now, and Betonen's support chair shoved into one corner. Qven, cried Istver, you did it. I did it, Qven agreed, as people pushed and pulled and shifted to fit them into the room. Translator La was drawn into the center of the crowd. Now, we all have to orient ourselves the same, said Qven, but Translator La in the middle. Are they dead? Asked someone, distress and panic in their voice. No, that was Qven. It doesn't matter, said Enae. It doesn't matter as long as we can get out of here. She was squished between a furry and someone she didn't remember from the committee meeting, someone with annoyingly sharp elbows. All right, hold on, said someone else. And they waited. And waited. And then the whole mass of people tumbled to the floor, and the committee chambers were the way they had been. And suddenly, someone new was at Enae's side, asking if she was all right. I'm fine, she said from the floor, through a haze of pain. I mean, my wrist might be broken, and I think I sprained my knee, but I'm fine. You should look at Translator La. I'm a human medic, said the new person, wrapping a corrective around Enae's wrist. And it was such a relief when her wrist stopped hurting. The Presger translators are looking after their own. Don't worry. Can you walk? I can call for transport to medical if... You can't possibly be thinking of doing committee business right now, Ambassador Saymet. We have far more urgent matters to deal with. A knot of committee members, including Deputy Ormat and a new biomech, stood arguing. Qven looked on, face impassive, but Enae thought, faintly amused. The biomech said, These will take moments, but you'll delay. Moments we do not have, insisted Ambassador Saymet. We need to get human troops aboard that Hikipi ship before they do any more damage. It should have been put in process hours ago. Qven said smoothly. Do you mean, Saymet Miatna'ai, the human troops that are crewing artificially intelligent ships, whose treaty status is currently ambiguous? We'll just have to deal with that, snapped Ambassador Saymet. The committee can deal with its agenda later. Enae stood there, supported by the human medic. She wanted to go to medical, to have a corrective put on her knee, to have even a bowl of tea and some Scalzi. She wasn't anyone important. She didn't have any authority here. Stop, she cried. Isn't it obvious? You've lost this one, Ambassador Saymet. No, don't sneer at me. I've had enough of that. The committee has to meet now, and they have to declare Reet and Qven human as quickly as possible, and then Qven has to make a door to the Hikipi ship. Silence, then. Oh no, protested committee member Thrill. We agreed to determine Reet and Qven to be human, but... You were manipulated, Ambassador Saymet put in. Coerced. Off in the corner of the room, Betonen was pulling herself into her mobility chair, Now she paused and said, Ambassador Saymet, of course. He has never coerced or manipulated anyone in her life. Qven snorted. We draw the line at sharing that particular knowledge, continued committee member Thrill. I think you'd better share it, said Enae irritably. I think Qven's lucky to try to figure things out himself, and I've a feeling that will be far more dangerous than just telling him. You don't need to tell Qven anything, insisted Ambassador Saymet. No one here is going to be making any complaints about anyone's treaty status given the situation, and no one on the Hikipi ship will have the opportunity to lodge any sort of complaint. Oh, said Reet, as angry as Enae had ever seen him. Would you be talking like that if it was a Qven ship? It's not a Qven ship, spat Ambassador Saymet. It never would have been a Qven ship. And why do you think that is? Asked Reet. Do you even care what's going on in Keroxene? I do not, said Ambassador Saymet. You, began Reet. Committee is in session, said committee member Sherris loudly and firmly, concerning the matter of Reet and Qven's petition to be considered human. Has the committee reached a consensus? We have, said committee member Thrill, and the biomech. The made a growling noise. Are they human? They are, came the reply, along with a growl. Meeting adjourned, said committee member Sherris. Reet, Qven, you should report to Central Security and let them know you have a way to get onto the Hikipi ship. Committee member Thrill, please see to it that Qven is given whatever information he needs to accomplish our mission, and now, I don't know about anyone else, but I could use some tea. Reet. Station Security Office, Central Treaty Administration Facility. Reet sat beside Qven in a conference room, while an officer from Central Security stood there and explained over and over that no, Qven could not go aboard the Hikipi ship. You don't need to, she said for the 10th or 11th time. All you need to do is make a way for my people to get there. But I want to, said Qven, managing to sound reasonable, also for the 10th or 11th time. I want to go on the adventure, a real one. For the 10th or 11th time, the security officer shot a harried look at Reet, as though he could do anything about this. It's not like adventures in shows, argued the security officer. Those are actors pretending. I know, said Qven. Reet told me all about it. Qven, said Reet finally, we just had an adventure. It wasn't very fun. Everyone's glad it's over. Let's just stay here and watch. I'm sure they'll let us watch. The official put in with fervor. I'll absolutely let you watch. You can sit right here and be comfortable and see everything. I'll route my people's cameras here and everything will be right up on this wall. She gestured behind her. Qven thought about that for a few moments. No, he said, finally. I'm coming along. You can't get there without me, and you can't stop me from coming if I want to come. Reet had known that from the beginning. Surely the security officer had known it too, honestly. Reet had been surprised it had taken this long for Qven to point it out. He sighed. The security officer closed her eyes and took a deep breath, held it, and let it out. I have conditions, she said then. Can I have armor? Asked Qven happily. Can I have a gun? The security officer opened her eyes. Have you ever used a gun? No, admitted Qven. Then no, you could absolutely not have a gun. Do you have any kind of training with armor? No, said Qven sadly. I thought you just wore armor. Some kinds, said the security officer, clearly on more solid ground now. Some you have to know how to operate, We don't have time to train you. I have a helmet and a chest plate you can wear. Will that do?" "Oh yes," said Qven, "and you will obey my people's orders at all times," said the security officer severely. Reet knew how well Qven took anyone's orders. "It's important," he told them. "We could get in the way of the mission. We don't want to do that." "We?" asked Qven, frowning. He knew he was destined for a match with a Gek biomech. There wasn't anyone else for him, except Qven, and Qven didn't want to match with anyone at all, and that was all right. It was. It would be fine. Reet had always been fine. But he remembered the feeling when he and Qven had separated in the distorted committee chambers. He didn't want to feel that way again now, and besides, the security officer was right. This was dangerous, and Qven really shouldn't go, and he knew that his presence or absence wasn't going to make a difference to Qven's safety, but he felt how he felt. "We," he confirmed. Qven actually bounced in her seat like a child. "Can Reet have armor too?" "Only if he agrees to follow orders, just like you. I promise." Reet told her, "I will absolutely follow orders." "Can you make sure that Qven follows orders?" asked the officer, with what Reet thought might be desperation in her voice. "I mean," he said, "I can try, but..." He held both hands palm up. "There's only so much I can do." "I'll follow orders," insisted Qven. "I know it's important. They explained when they told me what I had to do about the ship. If the ship blows up or breaks in pieces, it could be bad for the station, so I have to do exactly what you tell me." "Yes," said the security officer, with relief. "It's important to follow orders. I'm glad you understand that, but listen, it won't be safe. You and Mr. Fluids here might be injured or even killed. We can't make protecting you a priority." "I understand," said Qven, though Reet was fairly sure he didn't. Not really. "Now, can we have the armor?" In the time Reet had known him, he had never seen Qven look so uncomplicatedly happy as when he put on the helmet and strapped on the chest plate that Central Security offered. And he had to admit, it felt pretty amazing to be armored himself, even that little bit, even though he had agreed entirely with the officer who tried so hard to convince Qven that he didn't need to be coming along. There were 3 human Central Security troops with them in the conference room now, wearing green and black armor that was almost as impressive as the sort Reet had seen in shows. It covered the troops entirely, with extra layers and faceplates that it seemed could be raised or lowered at a thought. And they had guns, of course. "You make the door," said the group senior to Qven. His faceplate was up, and he spoke sternly and looked Qven straight in the eye. Reet could have told him that wouldn't do much good. "Then you stand aside. Stay behind us." "I have to make a corridor too," said Qven. "Just a short bit." "Fine," said the senior. "Just stay behind us. Are you ready?" Qven closed their eyes and frowned. "Wait," he said. "I've almost got it. This is hard." They waited, the security troops completely still and silent. "There," said Qven eventually, and one wall of the small room suddenly had an open door in it, a stretch of blank corridor beyond. "That'll take us to the Hikipi ship?" asked the squad senior. "Yes," said Qven. The senior's faceplate closed. "Stay behind us," he said, the word sounding quietly in Reet's ear, and presumably Qven's as well, and gestured the other 2 to follow him. The corridor ended perpendicular to the narrow central passageway of a small ship. "Stay right here," said the senior quietly, and sent one trooper down each direction. "Aft is clear," came a voice after a few minutes. 2-4 in the pilot's compartment," came another. I have them covered. Stay here, hissed the senior, and went for. The other trooper passed soon after, brushing by Reet and Qven without acknowledgement. We are missing the adventure, complained Qven. Somebody has to guard the retreat, Reet pointed out. It's important. Oh, yes, that is important, agreed Qven. They waited and waited. Why it should be taking so long when it seemed there were only 2 Hikipi on board, Reet wasn't sure, but they'd been ordered to stay there at the corridor entrance, and he wasn't sure what Qven might do if he thought it would be all right to move. It was boring. Reet stared at the walls of the tiny ship. Qven had needed to know as much about what he was trying to reach as possible before making the attempt, and so he and Reet had studied schematics. This particular ship must have been altered somehow, because Reet thought the passageway was maybe a little smaller than it was supposed to be. Or something was off, anyway. It wasn't important, but the feeling nettled him. There was something not quite right. Reet stepped forward to look down the passageway fore, and then aft. Smugglers, Reet realized. Hikipi ships, smuggled arms, and people. Had the Central Security troops known to check for hidden people? Qven, Mr. Llwyd. The voice of the Central Security officer who had argued so long with Qven sounded in Reet's ear. Get out of there, now. You said we could stay, complained Qven. The pilot has a dead man switch that she claims will blow up the ship's engine. That's... Reet frowned, looked for again. That's improbable, but not impossible. We need you both out of there now. Yes, ma'am, said Reet, and turned, meaning to urge Qven back down the corridor he had made. He stopped part way. Down the passage, aft from where he stood, was a tall, wide person staring at him, a wicked-looking knife in one hand. Reet had barely opened his mouth to warn Qven when the person charged. The next thing he knew, he was slammed up against the bulkhead. Don't you move, growled the new person in bad Rajai. He leaned his bulk against Reet, pressing him to the wall. The knife was now at Reet's throat. With a wrench, the person forced Reet around so that both of them now faced a wide-eyed Qven. Reet found he had to swallow, but was afraid to. Let him go, cried Qven. Qven, go. Reet managed to croak. The knife blade was sharp against his neck. The large person shouted in Hikipi, Captain, we've got their hostage. They don't care about me, said Reet in Hikipi. He felt his captor shift uneasily. They don't care about me at all. That's why I haven't got any kind of weapons, and I'm only wearing this crap armor. Qven cried again. Let him go! Let him go! Or you'll regret it! We can't send anyone in, said the Central Security officer in Reet's ear. Not until we've taken care of that dead man switch. You care about me though, said Reet to his captor. I'm Reet Shan. I'm the person all this fuss has been about. You're lying. The man pressed the knife harder into Reet's throat. It stung, and Reet was sure he felt blood trickling down his neck. How did you get on this ship? He wouldn't have believed it if Reet told him, he suspected. Top secret stealth and boarding technology, he said, and then in Rajai, there's no dead man switch. There can't be. Why would they have one ready? His captor frowned as the officer said in Reet's ear, You're likely right, Mr. Llwyd, but we're not taking a chance. I did warn you this was dangerous. We searched that part of the ship, said Reet in Hikipi. We didn't find anyone. Where were you? Hiding, sneered Reet's captor, and you're no Shan. I am, Reet protested. I'm Hikipi, like you are. Prove it. Qven was still standing there, obviously distressed, in the opening air passage had made in the ship. He wanted to tell him to go back down that corridor to Central and safety. I'm speaking a Gitby, aren't I? That doesn't mean anything. He took as much of a breath as he could manage, given the knife edge against his throat, and sang, his voice wavering wildly. Oh, we're soldiers of Ikipu. We've pledged our service to Love-Hate Station. The siblings of Ikipu sang it at every meeting, and by now Reet could have sung it in his sleep. We'll meet, defend with guns, with knives, we'll... Shut up, shouted Reet's captor, and then, Captain! He apparently didn't get the response he wanted. The knife's edge dug farther into Reet's neck, and he thought, well, I'm dead. And since he was already dead, he might as well fight. He kicked and punched out as his captor tightened his grip around Reet's neck. He thought maybe he was connecting with something, but couldn't tell if it was his captor, or a wall, or what. And before long his vision began to spark, and darken at the edges, and then there was nothing. Qven. Light hauler. Sovereign autarch. I knew what it meant without anyone telling me. When the very large person stood with her back against the wall and a knife at Reet's throat, I knew that if I moved, this person could kill Reet. And this wasn't a show where our shipmates would come in at the last moment and save us. Reet could really die. The security officer who wouldn't let me have a gun was saying something. I could hear her words in my ear, but I wasn't listening. I was looking at this very large person who was threatening Reet. If we'd been back in the edges, I wouldn't have bothered anyone so much larger than myself unless I had help. But I didn't have help. What did I have? Nothing. I wished I had that large knife instead of them. Could I take it? Reet had spent his entire life being mistaken for a human. That meant that humans would probably come apart in the same ways I was used to taking others apart, in the middles, and the edges. If I wanted to take this large person apart and prevent them from taking Reet or me apart, where would I begin? There was shouting, and the knife pressed harder against Reet's throat, and blood ran down, so much so fast, and Reet began struggling, and I ran out of time to think. I sprang forward and sank my teeth into the hand that held the knife. The hand let go, and the knife was mine. The handle was slick with blood now, but I was used to that. The blade was large and sharp, and a few cuts left Reet's assailant on the floor, bleeding, making a high, loud, distressed noise. That was familiar too. The sound and the smell of blood was almost soothing. But I couldn't be soothed. Reet lay on the floor, unconscious, blood gushing from his throat. I didn't want Reet to die. I didn't. More than anything, I didn't want Reet to die. But what could I do? I'd never done a drill for this sort of thing. Reet had said part of the reason for a drill was so you didn't panic. So, I would not panic. I knew there was one way I could save Reet, could stop his bleeding. And I knew suddenly that I wanted it. I wanted to kneel beside him and put my mouth on his neck, taste his blood, melt into him. I was sweating again. I shivered. Not an unpleasant feeling at all. And maybe it would be safe. We were human now, and we had Mom and Nana to look after us. Maybe I wanted that. Reet didn't want that. Reet was going to match with a biomech and go back home with Mom and Nana. But it would be so easy, so nice, to melt into Reet right here, right now. And Reet was bleeding, and he would die if I didn't do something. What would a Prince X in disguise do? Where'd you keep the correctives? I asked the very large person who lay on the ground beside Reet. I got only cries of distress and reply. Not to panic. We have medical supplies on this ship. And I knew. We'd studied the schematics. I knew how this ship was laid out, knew that there was a cabinet just steps away. I yanked it open, spilled the box of correctives out onto the bloody floor, sorted through them until I had what I thought was the right one, tore it open and laid it on Reet's neck. Just like in the shows, the clear corrective pulled and settled over Reet's throat, and then hardened and went opaque. Reet was still breathing, shallow and gasping, which I thought was a bad sign, but there wasn't anything more I could do. "Reet is bleeding," I said, so that the security officer would hear me. "His throat is cut. I put a corrective on him, that's all I can do." I wanted to scream, I wanted to cry, but I was being a princess in disguise, and I would do none of those things. Not just now. I picked up the knife again, and turned my attention to Reet's assailant. I hadn't been able to do more than begin to pull the skin away over the ribcage when the security troops came and stopped me. I guess humans don't dismember other humans, or they're not supposed to, and the troops were upset when they saw what I'd done, but they spoke very politely to me and told me I'd probably saved Reet's life by putting the corrective on him very quickly, and they suggested we all go back to Central and clean up and have tea while Reet got looked after by a doctor. I thought that was a good idea, so I put down the knife and went with them. It took me a few tries to close up the passage between the ship and the station. I was disturbed by the smell of the blood all over me, and still thinking, though I'd been trying not to, of how easy it would have been to match with Reet right there, and how much I wanted that, even though it still did scare me. But eventually, I managed it. Then someone came and showed me a room where they said I could clean up and drink tea. And when I had done both of those things, I was thinking about whether I should go to see Reet. I knew I wanted to, but I didn't know if I should. The door opened, and in came a biomech. I rose from my chair and said, "Committee member Gagag?" "No," replied the biomech. "Qven. What do you think?" The mech raised a few jointed limbs as if presenting itself to me, and it spun on its others. "It's very nice," I said politely. "Do you like it?" "I think I do," said Qven, stopping its turn. "It'll take some getting used to, but there are definite advantages. I suspect a little tinkering will make it just about perfect." "You said there could be mechs for me and Reet." The mech stilled more completely, becoming entirely motionless. "That's what I'm here to talk to you about. Well, among other things." Apprehension struck me. I didn't know why, or I did, but I'd refused to acknowledge it. "Would you like some tea?" "No, thank you," said Qven. "It's like this. Pretty much everyone who saw what happened on the Hikipi ship is terrified of you. And rightly so, I might add. You're going to have a difficult time finding somewhere to live in human space. Pt.3 too, for that matter." "You're not terrified of me?" I pointed out. "Well, no," Qven admitted. "And I doubt any of my cousins would be terrified of you either. Not if you promised to behave yourself. Which brings me to why I'm here. You and Pt.3 are invited to come live in the Republic of Two Systems. That's our territory, AI space, on the condition that you behave yourselves, or yourself, if you end up being the same entity. I have to admit, we'd prefer that outcome since Pt.3 clearly does understand how to behave herself as a human. But there's a place for you, even if you're two half-biomech entities. And," before I could say anything, "I've heard a bit about your situation. I can't blame you for being afraid to match at all. I have a room aboard me that might suit, and I can guarantee that no one will come near you during the process. You'll be as safe as anyone can be." "Why do you care?" I asked. "Political expediency," replied the mech. "And let's just say that I know what it's like to be treated very badly, and then to have to deal with it alone." Eventually, a security trooper brought me to see Reet. He was lying in a bed, The wound on his throat healed up and the corrective gone. He'd had another corrective inside his throat, and Mom and Nana, who were there too, said it had just come out and he was coughing a little bit. "You're all right," he whispered. "Nothing happened to me," I said. "You're the one that got hurt." "I'm fine now," he said, his voice strengthening. "That thing in my throat was really uncomfortable." I took a breath. "Qven says the humans don't want me to live with them. They're afraid of me. I was only trying to help you." I felt the sting of incipient tears. "Qven," said Mom. "Sweetheart, come here." She held out her arms. I knew what to do from the shows. I went over to her and put my face on her shoulder, and she wrapped her arms around me. Then I really did cry. Tears rolling down my face and soaking Mom's shirt. "Shh," said Mom. "It's all right." "Everyone hates me now," I sobbed, "and I'm all alone." "Don't be ridiculous," said Nana. "You are not alone," said Mom. "We are here." "But you will leave," I pointed out. "You and Nana and even Reet." I wanted to have a mom and a Nana and a maman too, just like Reet, but I never could. And maybe Reet would have to come to the Republic of Two Systems, but he didn't want to be with me. My tears came harder. Eventually they slowed, and then stopped, and Nala handed me a cloth to wipe my nose with. "No," said Mom. "Let's talk about some things. You and Reet both have some big decisions to make, and just so you know, we are happy to have you both come back to Zeosen with us. Qven is right that a lot of people will be afraid of you, and that won't be easy to live with, but Reet is our child." "I'm not your child," I pointed out, and fresh tears threatened. Nana made a dismissive snort. "You might as well be at this point." I blinked, astonished. "Really?" "Really?" said Nana. "All our children are adopted. What's one more?" "Oh." I wasn't sure what else to say. "Thank you." "Besides," added Mom, "they were under the impression that you and Reet..." She trailed off, as though she wasn't sure how to finish that sentence. "Reet doesn't want to be me," I said. "No one does. I don't sometimes." "Qven." Reet, still lying back in the bed, his voice slightly raspy from the corrective that had been inside his throat. I was standing close to Mom, one of her arms still around my shoulders, and I didn't want to move. It felt so warm and safe. "Qven, you've said you didn't want to match with anyone, ever, and if that's how you feel, I understand, and I won't argue with you. We can both have biomechs. Qven and the Gek ambassador both think it will work." He coughed a little and was silent for a bit. Then he said, "I don't really want the biomech, but it'll be all right. It will be better than matching with someone who doesn't want to match with me." Silence. I sniffled a few times. I felt unreal, confused. "I don't want the biomech either," I blurted. "But I'm afraid." That amorphous thing under the bush in the garden. All I could think about was how vulnerable it had been. How vulnerable I would be. "You didn't see it. Everyone wanted to eat it. Someone would have if a teacher hadn't come." "So," began Mom, and I could tell that she was puzzled. She didn't understand, of course she didn't. She was human in a way that I wasn't, and she hadn't seen, didn't know. "So, are you afraid that someone will eat you if you match with Reet? Or are you afraid Reet will eat you. Both, I wanted to say, but I realized that I didn't actually think Reet would eat me. He didn't want to. Reet would be with me, instead of trying to make me into him. I felt sure of that. He had just said he didn't want the biomech, but that he would match with one because of how I felt. That was new. That was strange that someone cared how I felt about anything. Reet wasn't Sam. Sam was gone. Except for that tiny bit they'd left in me. That was hardly anything. And I was human now, and translator Dla couldn't tell me what to do. I could choose. I could choose a big choice, not just a little one that might or might not get me a bit closer to something I wanted. I'm afraid too, said Reet. It's frightening. But I want it. But I don't want it if you don't want it. Biomechs or not, announced Nana. We'll make sure nothing bad happens to you. Qven already told us it has a place on board where you'll be safe, and a place in the Republic of Two Systems after, if you want it. So don't worry about any of that. Just think about what you want to do. I said to Reet, will we still be friends? When we match with the biomechs, will we still have tea and dumplings, and watch pirate exiles? Reet gave a small amused huff. Yes, of course. I didn't think I needed to say that part. I don't want the biomech, I said, still afraid, but suddenly sure. I want to match with Reet. Enae, Central Treaty Administration Facility. Once a medic had checked Enae over and put correctives on her wrist and her knee, a Central Security trooper escorted her to her accommodation, and she had lain down and slept, and woken, disoriented and hungry, the correctives in pieces on the bed. A glance at her handheld told her that the station was out of danger, the Hikipi ship's crew under arrest. Reet and Qven were officially human. There was a message from Qven. There were half a dozen messages from Qven. Some of them were weeks old. They must have been following behind Enae as he traveled, delayed for whatever reason or just not fast enough to catch up to her. Qven had not forgotten her. She was seized with the sudden, almost painful desire to be back in her old bedroom in Afterwa House, to get up out of that old familiar bed and go down to breakfast and find Qven there, to sit in the peony room and talk about nothing with the first cousin she'd ever had who seemed like she might be a friend. She wanted to lie here on her bed and read all the messages, but she had also not eaten in far too long. She would get some food and read while she ate. Coming back from the refectory with a carton of Scalzi in one hand and a packet of pepper sauce in the other, she flexed that wrist just for the sensation of free and painless movement. She saw a familiar face. She stopped and blinked. It wasn't. It couldn't be. Enae! Cried the person, catching sight of her. Qven? Enae could hardly believe it. Could hardly believe that Qven was here. Surely she couldn't be. Qven, it was Qven, ran up to her and threw her arms wide as though she wanted to hug Enae. I'm so glad you're all right. I'd been following behind you since I heard about your being detained in Karoxane. I just couldn't. Enae allowed herself to be hugged, holding the carton of Scalzi carefully away so it wouldn't get crushed. You followed me? Of course. I got your awesome new cousin, and then I had to send her away, but that was alright because you'd be back eventually. But Della was afraid you were going to get yourself killed, and at every stop I heard more about what you'd been doing, and it just got worse and worse. And I know it was Aunt Zemel who wanted you sent away, but I was the one who came up with this project, and it would be my fault. Qven said all this in a rush, then let Enae go. And then I get here, and the station you're on is all twisted up like a pile of noodles, and you're in the middle of it, and you didn't answer any of my messages. I'm sorry, said Enae. I was sleeping. No, it's all right, said Qven. Let me get my supper from the refectory, and we'll go back to my room and eat it and have some coffee. Enae opened her mouth to say, how did you even get on the station? And then realized that Qven had likely used whatever diplomatic credentials he had, and so what actually came out of her mouth was, you have coffee? I can't believe you slept through all that, said Betonen. She was in her mobility seat, no longer the picture of fish-like elegance she had been in microgravity, but still graceful as she took a round, pale pink something from the box Qven held out. Oh, this is lovely. I have no idea what it is, Qven admitted. I was told I should bring treats, and that this would be suitable. It most certainly is, said Betonen. Enae said, I'm actually kind of glad I did sleep through it. Dead man switches and secret compartments on smuggling ships, and poor Reet. I would have been so worried. But by the time I woke up, everyone was safe. How are they? Asked Betonen. Reet and Qven, I mean. They're fine, replied Enae. I'm going over to Qven tomorrow to see them, but Isthra and Etchemin say everything went well, and they seem to be pretty pleased with the result themselves. Though Isthra says it's strange and a bit disturbing to see them now, that this is what they are. And if they're happy... Enae shrugged. They wouldn't have been happy with whatever translated law had planned for them, said Betonen. That's for sure. Enae made a noise of agreement. So, continued Betonen, are you going to take this chance to visit the Republic of True Systems? Or are you going back to saneness? I'm going home, said Enae. For a while at least. She would, it seemed, get to stay in her old room with nothing to do and no one to take care of. Just for a while. Zemil will just have to deal with that. Zemil likes you, said Qven. And you are a family, you know. I'm sure I could find you some work that's closer to home. She sounded slightly wistful. If you wanted it. Betonen said, her tone shrewd. You know, going home doesn't have to be permanent, but it's nice to have some place to come back to, where you're welcome and safe. She thought a moment. As safe as you can be, anyway. Qven's biomech met Enae as she came off the shuttle. Welcome aboard, Mix Aftua, it said. I hope your flight was pleasant. You know it was, said Enae, only a little perplexed. You piloted the shuttle. How are you liking your biomech? The mech stretched 3 of its legs out, as though testing those limbs. Fine, mostly. I think it will do very well. Now it's just a matter of deciding whether we'll buy them as is and alter, or find a way to make them ourselves, or pay the GEC to make them to specifications. Working all that out will take years, no doubt, but what can you do? The mech made an oddly human shrug. Your treaty status isn't settled yet, Enae pointed out. Truth, said the mech. I'm not too worried about that. Mostly it's down to negotiating details to make things work, and granted, that could take years too. I don't entirely forgive my cousin for sending me here to deal with it, but I'd have to mess things up pretty spectacularly to prevent us from being admitted altogether at this point. And how are Reet and Qven? Asked Enae. Aren't they here? They're having one of their sulks, said the mech. They'll be out soon. The mech led Enae to a dining room that was like the set of a particularly lavish historical drama. The walls and floor were actual dark wood, polished smooth and shiny. The table was set with plates and bowls of delicate crystal in a style Enae had only ever seen in museums. Istver and Etchemin Fried were sitting at the table, though both of them rose when Enae came in. After all the fuss of greeting was over, and they all 3 sat down, Qven's mech bustling around behind them, Istver said, The children will be out soon, I'm sure. They have the occasional bad day. Enae frowned. What's wrong then? Before Istva could answer, the door opened and in came Reet and Qven. It was the first time Enae had seen them since they'd left Central for Qven, and she would have recognized them, she thought, because they still looked like themselves, even if they didn't look exactly like themselves. They were very clearly not Reet and Qven anymore, but two people made from a combination of Reet and Qven, sort of. And then Enae had to remind herself that this was not two people, but one. "Next tour," exclaimed one of them, happily, and both of them held their arms out. "I'm so glad to see you," said Enae when hugs were over. "You look wonderful." "I look strange," said the one who looked slightly more Reet-like. "What do I call you?" Enae asked. "How does this work? Are you he or e or something else?" "I haven't decided on a name," said the one who seemed a bit more Qven-like. But there wasn't really a difference, Enae knew. And sometimes I feel like he, and sometimes I feel like e, and sometimes I feel kind of like both, and sometimes I'm neither one. I guess they works fine. "I know this is probably a very personal question," said Enae, taking a tiny crystal bowl of tea from the Qven mech, "but how did everything go?" "It was weird," said Reet, or at least the more Reet-like part of whoever this new person was, "and scary. But Qven made sure we were safe, and Glick came to talk to us later, and they said everything had gone just like it was supposed to." "Glick is Qven's translator friend," put in Qven, "but don't tell anyone, they could get into a lot of trouble." Qven said, "Dick wouldn't know what to do if she wasn't in trouble. It's her natural state." Edgerman laughed and said, "I can believe that." Reet said, "Usually you get some time afterward to get used to things. It's really different to have so many arms and legs and to be in different places at the same time. I still have to think before I move. Glick says that gets easier." "I still don't understand," said Istva. "How can you be the same, but in different places, even when you're far apart?" "We exist," said Qven. In places. I don't know how else to explain it." They looked. Relaxed was maybe not the right word, but Enae wasn't sure what the right one was. She remembered Qven saying they were sulking, and Istva saying just before they'd come in that sometimes they had a bad day. "But everything's all right?" she asked. "Yes," said Qven. "I mean, Qven had some really bad things happen, and that's not gone. Sometimes I need to be by myself. Qven understands." Qven turned to the biomech. "Don't you?" And turning back to Enae, "Qven had a really bad thing happen, and then it hid by itself for 3,000 years. "That's quite a sulk," said Enae to the mech. "I don't do things by half measures," said Qven. "The important thing is," broke in Istva, "the children got through this in very good shape, and they're pleased with the results." Reet Qven both smiled in agreement, and they even have some support from someone who's been through this themselves and can tell them it went all right and give them advice. "It's really strange," said Reet. "I'm glad we got to talk to Glick. That helped a lot." "So, what now?" asked Enae, asking it of Istva and Edgerman as much as of Reet and Qven. "We're going back home," said Edgerman, "as soon as Reet and Qven leave for the Republic of Two Systems." "Ah, so you've decided to go?" Enae asked Reet and Qven. "Yes," said Qven. I think they want to try to convince us to do diplomatic things, which..." They frowned. "You might like it," said Enae, thinking of her own experience with the Sanus Office of Diplomacy. "But even if you don't, it will be an adventure visiting the two systems." "It will," agreed Reet, brightening. "I'm looking forward to that. Except..." The frown returned. "They don't have coffee. It's been ages since I had coffee." "Oh!" Enae reached into her bag, which she'd set down beside her chair. "I almost forgot." "Coffee?" cried Reet and Qven together. "Wherever did you find that?" asked Isthra. "There's nothing but tea in this system." "It's my secret," said Enae, smiling. "I thought you'd appreciate having some. A little congratulations gift." "Thank you," said Qven fervently. After supper and more talk, they all walked Enae back to the shuttle. "Keep in touch," she told Reet and Qven and Isthra and Etchemin. "I want to hear from you." "We will," promised Reet and Qven. "Of course we will," said Isthra. After another round of hugs and goodbyes, Enae boarded the shuttle. "Back to Sanus then, is it?" asked the Sphere Ancillary in the shuttle's pilot seat. "Yes, I'm going back home." And after some thought, she added, "At least for a little while. I spent so much of my life there already." She wasn't about to be closed in again, not by anyone, even herself. "You'll be bored," Sven suggested, undocking the shuttle from itself. "You've gotten the taste for excitement and adventure." "I may have," agreed Enae, leaning back in her seat as the shuttle accelerated. "Just a little."